Sorry. We're going to open a public hearing on Senate Bill 597. I recognize the Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff, Grant Bossy, who will be introducing the bill for Senator Avard. I wanted to give him a promotion, but apparently he...
Good morning, Chairman Lang and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Grant Bossy from the New Hampshire Senate, here to introduce Senate Bill 597 on behalf of Senator Kevin Avard, the bill's prime sponsor. This removes the requirement that an electronic dispenser of Lucky 7 tickets provide the option of printing a paper ticket. Printing a ticket used to be mandatory. It was made optional by Senate Bill 22 back in 2021. Since that time, virtually no paper tickets have been printed. Players do not choose the option. However, the paper feed can jam and put the machines to go out of service if the paper roll shifts, et cetera. If you've ever tried to get a paper towel out of the restrooms here, they jam a lot, and it takes time and effort to clear that up. Requiring clubs to load paper into the device for a ticket that players have shown they don't want is an out-of-date practice that adds unnecessary expense and delays. If you have any questions, I can make sure to get you an answer. Senator Avard asks you for your support of Senate Bill 597. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Grant? We have one other speaker. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
Next up is Ashley, and I won't even pretend to say your last name, from Grover Gaming, to speak in support of the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ashley Chiramanis. I am here in support of SB 597. I'm with Grover Gaming, which is a company that manufactures and distributes electronic Lucky 7 machines. We partner with charities throughout New Hampshire that are licensed to sell Lucky 7 tickets, and they use our electronic dispensers to do so. When electronic Lucky 7s were first approved by the legislature, there was a requirement that a paper ticket had to be dispensed that was a printed representation of the outcome of every ticket played on the device. In 2021, the law was changed to remove the requirement that every ticket had to be printed, and the player was given the option of printing instead. Since the mandate was adjusted, giving the player the option, no player chooses to do so, at least not in our charitable partner locations. When these printed tickets were required, we were changing large rolls of paper multiple times a month, and in some cases per week. Millions of very small pull tabs that represented the win or loss on the screen of the electronic device were being thrown away each year until the bill removed that requirement. Since that change, we have not replaced a single roll of paper in any active device, and we are required to put them in all new devices placed in a facility, and rolls of paper sit in a device that will never be used. Since the electronic Lucky 7 still have the requirement that the printed ticket be optional, this can lead to problems with the machines. If the printer that creates this ticket malfunctions in any way, the device will put itself out of operation. The machine only becomes active again once the problem is resolved, which creates a situation that can negatively affect our charitable partners, as a device that is not operational cannot generate revenue for that organization. All plays on a device are electronically recorded, so paper tickets are not needed for any security reasons. Grover Gaming's machines also store 200 screenshots for the previous 200 tickets played on the device itself, which the charitable organization is able to see. Considering players never choose to print a ticket from an electronic device, there is simply no need to require the printing option be available. I would also like to add that 6 of our states that our company currently conducts similar electronic gaming business in, of those, New Hampshire is the only state that requires such a paper dispenser printer option. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Do we still sell pull tabs?
The paper
Yes.
version? Yes. The cardboard,
Yes.
the RIP tickets as they call them? Yes,
Right, the pull
we do.
tabs.
Yep, absolutely.
And further question.
Oh,
So in your activity, you got the machines now, so
Correct.
you could do multi-games on it, and so forth and so on.
Mhm.
So what's happened to the sale of the 25-cent ticket, the 50-cent ticket, and so forth? What's happened to that as a result of the building and the using of the machines?
So it differs per charity. Some charities will always have, or some nonprofit organizations will always have a dedicated group of paper Lucky 7 players. Some players gravitate towards the electronic devices. In either case, it's still revenue generating for the clubs. It hasn't replaced paper Lucky 7 tickets. It's just an addition to.
What further question?
Oh.
In the bingo halls, the paper, the pull tabs are still the play of the game, correct?
Correct, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you, thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Valerie, did you want to speak? You're all set.
Thank you.
Ashley, thank you very much. Valerie, did you want to speak on, so Valerie King here from Lottery is the person responsible for this part of the activity in Lottery, and I thought my committee members have questions. I'm going to follow up on Senator D'Alessandro's question. So again, my understanding is in the social clubs, the Elks Club, VFWs, those kind of places, they both do a combination of machine for the casual gambler, and then when they have events, they also allow for paper pull tabs. Is that correct?
Yes, both types are allowed. It's really just a matter of the demand from the players on whether or not they have both.
And then to Senator D'Alessandro's point, most often we see pull tabs at places like bingo halls. where-
Bingo is where it's most common. It's the paper pull tabs. Yes.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
So two other people signed in support of the bill, Rick Newman and Mike McLaughlin. Is there anybody else who wishes to testify on Senate Bill 597? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on Senate Bill 597, and I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session. Been moved by Senator D'Alessandro, seconded by Senator Murphy. How about we take up the one we just heard for discussion? Seems to be a pretty straightforward bill. So it's been moved by Senator Rosenwald, ought to pass, seconded by Senator Innes. Further discussion on 597. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, it's unanimous. Motion for consent. Been moved by Senator Murphy, seconded by Senator Innes to place on consent. Who would like to take it out? So, I'm sorry? Oh, all those in favor of consent, say aye. Opposed, nay. 5-0, it'll be on consent. Senator Rosenwald will take it out. Next, we're just going to run down the list by number. 432, did you pass out that amendment? So 432 is our advanced deposit wagering bill. This is basically off-track betting, for lack of a better phrase. Allowing betting on your phone or by calling in. Technically, in New Hampshire, we have this weird situation where the Brook, which is the only current place that does in-person betting, was allowed to take horse race bets, but nobody else could do it. You couldn't use an app to do it, even though we allow it within the state. This bill legalizes that online version to allow. There are 3 or 4 companies that currently do this and haven't been paying the tax because the Attorney General feels it's a gray area because we allow horse racing. We haven't explicitly allowed online, not sure whether we can prosecute. So this bill makes that legal. It sets the tax rate the same as an in-person bet. So it's not, if you were bet on a horse race at the Brook, you would pay a 1.25% tax. If you bet on your phone, you'll pay a 1.25% tax, which is different than the bill last year, which had a higher tax rate. This amendment, what it does is something different. That new revenue that's coming in will be basically diverted for charitable purposes. It establishes a charitable fund, allows lottery to have a third-party intermediary manage that fund and issue grants out to any charity who is eligible to participate in charitable gaming but does not participate in charitable gaming. So again, people on the wait lists, those kind of things would be eligible to file for a grant request from the third-party intermediary. It puts reporting requirements on the third-party intermediary that they have to report out where the money was given, how much was given, some of the non-identifiable demographic data about what the charities were. So that's what the amendment does. So I'm going to move OTP on the bill. Do I have a second? I have to get the bill first. You have to get a motion on the bill. Yep, so it's been moved and seconded, and then I'm going to move on to pass on the amendment so we can discuss the amendment. So moved by Senator Lang, seconded by Senator Rosenwald to move the amendment, and now we're open for discussion on the amendment. Sure.
So I see that you're defining charitable organization.
What
at
page
the
and line are you
bottom
on?
of Page 3, the last 3 lines, last 2 lines, defined in RSA 287D1 Roman 4. I remember that last month we made a change to Senator Gannon's bill about charitable organizations, and we referenced the statute that define them. Is this the same
My
statute?
understanding is yes, it is. Well, that's a statute that's defined, and Charlie can answer, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the statute that defines who's eligible to participate in charitable gaming. It's under the 287 statute, which is the gaming statutes. So,
Because I think that my memory is that the definition of what is a charitable organization is up in the early numbers of the RSA.
so this isn't that. So this is not that definition. We define under that RSA what kind of charities are eligible for participation in. So Charlie, we're on page 3, the bottom line, Roman letter A, small a, where we say that provide charitable grants from eligible contributions to charitable organizations as defined in 287-D:1, Roman numeral 4, who are not participating in charitable gaming. So that definition is Lottery's definition of which charities are eligible to participate in charitable gaming. So it's not all charities. It's only the ones that are eligible to participate in charitable gaming and choose not to.
Could we ask what that definition
I'd have to look at-
is?
maybe,
Right, under the definition, you have to have a certain designation under the IRS 501c. There's a 3, 4, 7, 8, 10, and I think there's one other. The specific types of tax exempt charities that are eligible. You'd have to be registered with the Secretary of State for at least a year as a domestic nonprofit. That's something that we require to make sure that the money stays in New Hampshire. And if required by New Hampshire statute, you need to also be registered with the New Hampshire Charitable Trust, which are your 501c3s.
So do you allow all those 501c types,
I could read the
Or is
statute.
it
Go on, I just pulled it up just to
3,
play it safe,
but
right?
not 4, not 8?
So here's what's allowed. A charitable organization means any bona fide religious, charitable, civic, veterans, or fraternal or church organization, including police, fire organization, houses of worship, which shall be registered with the Secretary of State for at least 1 year and in existence as an organization under the laws of the state for at least 1 year in the town or city of the state. To be eligible for licensure under this chapter, a charitable organization shall do all of the following. Document that the organization has a tax exempt status under the IRS Code Section 501c3, C4, C7, C8, C10, C19, or is covered under a group ruling issued by the IRS under the authority of those sections. Establish that and then number 2 is as another establish that the religious, civic, fraternal, veterans, charitable purpose for which it is organized other than charitable gambling are further through activities conducted in the town or city in which the charity is organized. And number 3 is the document registration for the Secretary of State for at least document registration with the Secretary of State for at least 1 year, if required under RSA 7:19-32-A, with the Director of Charitable Trusts. And 4, maintain our current list of bona fide members. And the last one is charitable organizations shall not include auxiliary units, committees, or other entities organized under the auspices of charitable organization eligible for licensure under this chapter when such auxiliary unit, committee, or other organization is organized primarily for the purpose of conducting games of chance. That's the entire
Conducting
definition.
what?
That it's not just created just for the game of chance. So so those are the charities. If you meet that definition, if you can currently participate in charitable gaming, then you will be eligible from this funding, this grant program from gaming.
So,
Yep.
So Charlie, 501c3s were usually the keys in terms of the charitable gaming statute.
Yes, Senator, the vast majority of the charities are 501c3s.
But that's been expanded so that 4s, 5s, 6, they can all participate in the charitable gaming?
They've always been eligible. It's just the threes are the most common
Yes.
types, but the 3, 4, 7, 8s, they've all been in the definition.
Okay, but further question, but the 501(c)(3)s are the not-for-profits. Now, what's a 4? What's the definition of a 4?
Sounds like fraternal.
Yeah, there's different social clubs is one of them. Churches, I think, is a 4, I think. It's the firemen's and things like that. They'd all are covered by those different numbers.
Yep.
It's just not including other designations who are tax exempt, but might not necessarily be considered charities, such as political PACs.
Political PACs?
Yeah, so under 501, there's a designation for various political organizations as well, which is not eligible for charitable gambling revenue.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons they're excluded.
Okay. But under your jurisdiction at this point in time, are the majority of those who participate in charitable gaming 501c3s, which are not-for-profits?
It's about 80% of them are 501c3s, are the ones receiving charitable gambling revenue.
Give me an example of one that's not a 501c3 that participates in the charitable gaming.
Yeah, that's hard because we don't, that's an IRS designation.
I understand.
But I believe the 501c4s, I believe that's churches. And I think 7 and 8 are like the fraternal halls and social clubs. So there's one that's going to be specific for veterans of war. And then there's one that's for social clubs. And then there's one for churches.
So it covers a broad spectrum. Okay. Thank you.
Representative Senator Rowe.
Thank you. Aren't advocacy groups organized as 501c4s?
I wouldn't know. The designations for eligibility were decided a number of years ago. And I don't think that I imagine advocacy groups, you're always advocating on behalf of your beneficiaries, right? So if you're the, ASPCA, you're going to advocate on behalf of animals. But I don't think any specifically designed advocacy groups are eligible for charitable gambling pursuant to designations. But that's an IRS question in terms of which section of the code you fall under.
Hello? So again, Mike, understand the goal of the amendment was not to expand or change which entities are eligible for charitable gaming. It was strictly to say that if an entity is eligible under current law, they would also be eligible for these grants, provided they're not also participating in charitable gaming. So you can't be a charity with the Brook and apply for a grant from the third-party administrator. You can do one or the other. Yeah.
No, I just also add, Mr. Chairman, that there are a number of charities that don't do this because it's too much money. And so a week at the Brook is $100,000, and some charities just don't need that much money. And so I believe this program is meant to sort of augment smaller charities with smaller amounts of money.
Correct. So I think, Charlie, on the revenue side, I think you said this new revenue would generate about $250,000 to $300,000 a year is the number we're talking about, would be set aside. As again, we're not taking from the general fund because this is a new revenue stream.
Correct.
We're just designating that revenue stream to go for charitable purposes.
And candidly, one of the benefits of this bill is that there's now consumer protection around an activity which is existing in our state without any guardrails.
Just to follow up on that point, Charlie, problem gambling. What kind of an arrangement do you have with the New Hampshire Problem Gaming Group?
Yes.
I was in contact with them yesterday about the amount of money that they receive or haven't received. They cut the deal with DraftKings. It was supposed to be $15K a year for 3 years.
Yeah.
and that was a national deal, all right? And as I understand it, they've only paid 1 year. They haven't fulfilled that commitment for the second year.
Okay.
So who tracks that down? And this money, how much of this money that's being accrued will be designated for charitable gaming? Because for problem gaming, and also the breakage money, if you cut that deal, where you'll adjust the software so that the breakage won't be counted, you'll put a fee. That fee, is all of that money for problem gaming?
So under the current law, breakage from simulcast racing goes towards problem gambling, and it's also contained in the state budget. So there's $250,000 we're required as part of our expenses to send to problem gambling. The revenue source was deemed to be breakage. If you do away with breakage, we're still required to send $250,000 as part of our expenses to problem gambling. So there's no lost revenue there. We also support problem gambling. They use our facilities. We help them with mailings. We let our ad firm do work for them. And so we support them that way. Their national arrangement for the National Council with DraftKings is outside of our purview. DraftKings is required to have a number of problem gambling protocols in place on the mobile as well as the app for the computer. Set limits, self-exclusion, factors like that they're required to do as per our law and contract. But the $15,000 a year is separate from that.
Okay, but as overseer of the gaming situation,
Yeah.
what responsibility do you assume to make sure that that deal is fulfilled?
I certainly, Senator, I'm embarrassed that I didn't know that it existed. I do know that DraftKings is interested in problem gambling, but I didn't know that there was a separate national program by where they would donate per state. But certainly, we make sure that DraftKings complies with all of the provisions of our laws as well as our contract, and also has certain provisions where their call center operators are trained to look for certain buzzwords. And if the buzzwords are spoken, the account is deactivated.
Okay. So just one further point, Mr. Chairman. So if a deal was cut, I mean, you monitor the DraftKings situation.
Yeah.
So if they cut a deal nationally
Yes.
with all of the states that participate, and this $15,000 commitment was a 3-year commitment, I understand, I haven't verified that.
Yeah.
But I'm told that was a deal that was struck. And the first 15,000 was paid, but the subsequent 15,000 hasn't been paid for the second year, and it goes on. But indeed, as we do more of this stuff, we're expanding that ability to game,
Yeah.
to play the games. And therefore, the responsibility to deal with the problem of gambling, we should make sure that, A, they fulfill their commitment. And if we have made a commitment, which obviously we have, we take care of that. And the methods that we use were breakage, right? And that seems to be in a state of flux now, because if they change the software, you won't have the breakage anymore. But you talked to us last time about there'll be a fee, all right? And that fee will go to problem gaming.
Yeah, it certainly, I was unaware of it. I'll follow up with DraftKings today and find out what the
Great.
status of that is. And so I foresee no difficulty in that, Senator. As for the funding, as long as it's in our budget to fund problem gambling, the source is we're agnostic to the source.
Sure.
I mean, last year, we were $187 million in profitability. $250,000 for us is not that concerning in terms of expenses. Just don't say that too loudly to our CFO. He'll take that personally. But in terms of funding, the money set aside, it's an expense in our budget, and it's not an issue for this year for them. They're administratively tied to us, but as you can imagine, I take no active role in their operations or management because our functions are different.
Sure.
So Charlie, again, so while this issue is indirectly tied to this, not directly, but indirectly tied to this issue, to this bill, you'll take it as an action item, you're going to follow up with DraftKings
Yeah.
to find out, to make sure if they're in compliance, have John or whoever call to make
Yeah,
sure they're in
of course.
compliance with the agreements we've made with the state and with the nationally as well. And you'll get back to the committee with just an email, just telling us what the answer was to that
Of
question.
course, yeah, of course.
Does that satisfy with you?
Yeah, perfect, thank you, thank you.
I've just been able to look up the IRS definition of a 501c4, and it does include organizations that engage in substantial lobbying activities. How many 501c4s that are lobbying groups are currently participating?
We actually don't necessarily count the different types. We just check that they are one of the types. But generally, they're, 80% of them that we see are going to be 501c3s. There's a spattering after that. I'm not even sure if we could give you an exact number, but I can try and see if we can.
That would be great. I have one other question. I noticed, and it's really for you, I noticed you changed the effective date from 2024 to 2025. And
So the reason for that, again, was to give lottery a chance. They have to go and find a third-party intermediary. And in order for them to be able to have time to be able to establish and get a third-party intermediary, I don't want the grant program to go into effect before we've established who the third-party intermediary is. And once Charlie's done that work, then we can start collecting revenue and be able to disperse that revenue.
he can't start doing that work until the bill becomes effective. So would delay this again. I mean, if it were effective,
So Charlie, you want to
Now
speak
he
to
can
that?
start
Are you able to?
the work.
Yeah. Yeah, so a good question is, we have an effective date of July 25. Does that mean you can't even begin looking for a third-party intermediary until July of 25, or is that, would you be able to do that beforehand?
I certainly wouldn't be able to contract with one before that date. Certainly could have conversations and the like, but, and ultimately I would have to confer with council, but I'd have to imagine I'd have to get an executive council approval as well on any arrangement we have thereafter. So,
We should move it forward.
So we can pass it and then do a committee amendment just to change the effective date. And that, so once we adopt the amendment, then it's open to further amendment, and we can make a simple committee change of changing it 24 to 25.
But then he can get started.
And not give. Do you guys have any comments on that? You okay with that? Pete, you okay with that idea? Okay. All right. Think any further questions for lottery?
Mr. Chairman, the taxes from New Hampshire residents. They, aren't there non-New Hampshire residents who participate in this gaming?
yes, there are,
A few?
more than a few.
Okay. So how does that fit? Is everybody a New Hampshire resident when they gamble or when they make this bet?
I mean, certainly they're in New Hampshire when they're doing it.
Right.
How you would characterize resident is, certainly they're New Hampshire participants.
Okay. Okay. And the 1.25 is what you have settled on?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to make, you're doing the same activity with, so you have the same tax rate. It's just in the manner in which you do it slightly different.
Okay. Okay, great, thanks.
I have one more.
So,
Could I follow up on Senator D's question?
yeah, so I'm following up on this New Hampshire residents,
Okay.
because that was, I'm marking it, that was not the intent of the bill, it's how
Okay.
OLS drafted it. So I'm looking how many times they say to New Hampshire residents, and whether we can just strike that language in a further committee amendment, as part of that committee amendment, to make sure it's clean and make sure the sentences follow through, because that was not the intent. It's basically understanding that we will have, as part of the conditions, because of federal government, we'll have geofencing put in, so you only bet on the app in New Hampshire. And the intent was, while you're in New Hampshire and betting in an app, this taxes applies. So, so I think they can, OLS confuse that with residency instead of just meaning located in New Hampshire. So I just wanted to check real quick and see. And Charlie, that's your interpretation as well?
Yes. I mean, certainly, in theory, it's a violation of federal law to have a horse racing wager across state lines, in theory. No one's enforced it, though.
So as I see it, it's on page 3 in section 5, we'd have to strike from New Hampshire residents, or it reads advanced deposit wagers shall be subject to instead of, and then in line 19, it says 1.25% of all wages accepted in a manner prescribed, and strike from New Hampshire residents again. And then the next one in 7, line 23 and 4, persons are in, it just strike, offered the advanced deposit wagers as of, and just strike to New Hampshire residents. Like, it's all I can see for where they put that in there. So we can do that as a follow-up committee amendment, strike those 3 lines so that it's clear. We're just talking about wagers that occur within New Hampshire, not specifically only for New Hampshire residents.
Thank you. I just have some questions for you, if I may. So this amendment doesn't have the games of chance or benefit of the host community language, right? Page 5, and I just want to understand the rationale here. Page 5, line 8 and 9. Because this looks like different language. Each licensee operating historic horse racing machines must contract with 2 licensed charitable organizations for each game date. I don't necessarily object to that. I just want to kind of understand why. That looks like different language.
Let me see if we did here.
Maybe it's in the original bill. I just didn't see it.
What? Yeah, let me find it. Give me 1 second. I understand what you're saying. Charlie, do you have the amendment? Can you take a look at that section? Because actually, I don't even think we need it. The whole section D, I don't think we need it all. I think it was I had told OLS, the original, they sent me an original amendment that included DRA and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I had to go back and I told them that it was not supposed to include historic horse racing. And I think they accidentally left that section D in there. So,
Mr. Chairman, section D, the last page,
last page, yeah. I think we can strike that entire
I don't
section.
think it's necessary.
Yeah, I agree. So again, as part of the
This is
committee
the-
amendment,
this
we
is
need to
the
strike
bucket of
that. It was
something else.
not intended to include anything with historic horse racing, strictly ADW. So once we adopt the amendment, we can then do a further committee amendment with the date change, striking the New Hampshire language and striking section D. Thank you. Good catch, Keith. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on amendment 789 or questions for lottery? What's it? No, I'm glad. All right. So we're up for a vote on the amendment, adopting amendment number 789S. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of amendment 789S signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment stopped it. It's open to further amendment. Senator Rosenwald, do you want to make those edits?
Sorry, I'd like to propose we change the effective date to July 1st, 2024.
Okay. I think we just merged all of the into a motion. Also strike section D on page 5.
And also change, strike New Hampshire residents.
And on page 3, strike on line 17. So the motion is to change the effective date to 2024, to strike section D on page 5, and on page 3, to strike on line 17 from New Hampshire residents, on line 19 from New Hampshire residents, and on line 23 to New Hampshire residents. So that's the amendment. That would be the committee amendment. And I'll second that motion. All those in favor to the committee amendment signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, 5-0. And now we're voting on the bill as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion for consent. Moved by Senator Linus, second by Senator Del Sandro. All those in favor of consent signify by saying aye. All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and I'll take it out, my bill. So and it's on consent, so it makes it easy. Next up, Senate Bill 434, we all set there, Sonia? Okay. 434. So just as a summary of Senate Bill 434, if you remember, this was the idea that hotels could designate part of their stay as long stay, extended stay, and be not subject to the rooms and meals tax. And we understand there already is a provision within law for the 185 days. If you stay that, you don't have to pay the tax, but what we found out was that you have to request a refund. You still pay it and then have to request a refund from DRA, and most people don't know you have to do that, so it doesn't count. So my inclination of this bill is that the bill as written is not very good, but it is a good subject to bring up next year to talk about whether or not hotels at 185 days can be exempt from the rooms and meals tax. And if that contract's broken, they're subject to it, but until then, they don't have to collect it and ask for a refund. But that's a whole separate bill from this. So, I'd entertain a motion on this bill. It's, you're being polite.
Yeah, I would move on to.
All right, so it's been moved by Senator, do you withdraw, 1 second, he already made the motion, so do you withdraw your motion of interim study? Okay, he's withdrawn his motion, it's been moved by Senator NSITL, seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 434? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it 5-0. Senator Ennis moves consent. Is there a second? Second by Senator D'Alessandro. All those in favor of consent signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Senator Ennis, would you mind taking a note?
Would be an honor.
Great. All right. Next one. Senate Bill 472. So this has undergone several iterations and amendments. So 472, as you recall, is the historic horse racing bill. The bill extends the moratorium out to 7 years, has the same provisions that were in the original bill, other than the extension. It allows for any new gaming operators that have applied since October 18th of last year when the bill was introduced. The concept was introduced of allowing people who have already applied for licenses to continue to move forward in their application process. So this would allow those licenses to move forward, and it would extend extend the moratorium out 7 years. As just a word, the industry has agreed to 7 years, if that's a practice they'll accept. That charities, you'll see there's numerous charities that have written in support of the bill. Under the current bill, there's an amendment, Senator Rosenwald's amendment. And so we would have to adopt the original bill as filed, and then we can move on to Senator Rosenwald's bill and amendment to that bill, which includes the municipal host language, including some of Senator Murphy's language from the municipal host that he had. We merged it into one single amendment. There was one line struck, and Senator Rosenwald can speak about that when we get there. But the first order of business is a motion on 472, and I'd move ought to pass 472. And seconded by Senator D'Alessandro. It's now open to further amendments. Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. I'd like to propose amendment 0744S. And this amendment,
Let's get a second on that, and then you can speak to your amendment. And second by Senator D'Alessandro again,
Thank
explain
you.
your amendment.
this amendment tries to marry the 3 or 4 different previous versions. So specifically what it does is on lines 14 and 15 of page 1, it requires that annually a minimum of 7, but not more than 10 game dates for the benefit of the town where the facility is located, be operated. But down in Roman 12, A, starting on line 29 of that page, is Senator Murphy's proposal that that charitable organizations get first dibs on these dates. And also that they not have to accept a charity if they have had a prior conflict with the charity management or employees. What it doesn't include is the second carve out that Senator Murphy's amendment, which I don't think we ever took up, was going to propose, which is if the operator had conflicts with the mission of the charitable organization. I heard pushback from operators on that. They are in support of this amendment. I think it's a compromise that takes parts of everybody's good ideas. It keeps the 7-year moratorium, and I hope we can agree on it. Thank you.
So Judge Safety, what it does, it struck on yours, you had that sincerely held ethical or moral differences with the mission of a specific charity or type of charity. You had that language, and there was some pushback, including from me, what that means. Remember that the operator still always gets to pick which charities they get the support. So that language is seen inconsistent.
I understand, and I think we can all understand maybe why that's there, right? There are all charities out there that we may not just agree with their mission, and it strikes me as obviously unjust to force people to do business with people they would choose not to do business with. However, that isn't my objection. I like the amendment. I'll support the amendment. I think it improves the bill. And then I can hold my comment for the bill as amended after that. Great, thank you.
To add one thing.
Sure.
I thought that your idea that charities have first right of refusal was really elegant and a really good solution.
Further discussion on Amendment 744S. Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment 744S signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The bill is amended and open to further amendment. Is there any further discussion on the bill as amended? Or any additional amendments? Senator Murphy.
I renew my repeated and long-standing objection to the moratorium. I take the Constitution of our state very seriously. Article 83 says that free and fair competition is an inherent right of the people. And yet we have groups come before us over and over and over saying, don't just give us a level playing field, tilt the table towards us, tilt the table towards us. And here is a group saying, tilt the table towards us. Now, we come in today to find this pack of letters. These letters are all written by different charities, obviously with the same format, the same language, for the same casino. And this casino is owned by a gentleman who I know well. He's actually, I'm poking the bear a bit, because he actually owns the building that I rent in Manchester. Okay, so if I get evicted from my restaurant, I guess you'll know why. But he's a great man. He knows a lot of things, but he's been lobbying very hard on this. And I can't support this. Just on my conscience, I can't support giving charitable gaming operators a moratorium. They're going to push back over and over and over. And 7 years is great. They'll be back in 8 years or 6 years saying, give us more time. And at the end of the day, we need to let the market supply the number of people and operators that it wants to supply. And it's going to be a number. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 12. It's not the legislature to determine how many is the right number. Free and fair competition is an inherent right of the people. And if we're going to put a cap on the number of licenses, I'm not going to support it, and I'll say so on the floor. Thank you.
So there is.
Wouldn't you love it if there was a restriction on the number of competing restaurants in Manchester?
Yeah, how do I get that restriction?
Right,
I think we should have 500 liquor licenses in the state, and luckily I have 2 of them.
there you go.
Well, thank you. Well, Senator Murphy, you know, I kind of agree with what you're saying, but this is the problem that I see. Right now, we have supposedly 10 casinos. Okay, 10. With what's in the pipeline, we will have at least another 5, so that's 50.
We have 15.
That'll be 15. And we have one that's been held back but's available for sale. When I put my gambling bill together, 2 was too many. 2 was that was calumny. You can have 2 gambling facilities in New Hampshire? My goodness gracious, that's obscene. That's an obscenity. Now we have 19, and not enough. Not enough. I battle with this on a day-to-day basis. But the worm is turned. The charitable gaming has taken over. So on the one hand, you make good sense. On the other hand, I think there have got to be some restrictions. Otherwise, this thing is going to get out of hand. I mean, in my opinion, it's already out of hand. And if I watch another ad on Channel 9 that tells me about how it is to gamble and the millions of dollars that are going to be made, well, I mean, come on, give me a break. Those $1 million are made by people losing millions of dollars. So on the one hand, I agree, but on the other hand, I think you got to do something. I think this is, for right now, this is a reasonable solution. But in 7 years, the world will turn. Now, I don't know which way it's going to go, but it's going to turn, that's for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just want to say, and I've waited a long time to say this, when I was in the House for 8 years, I voted against every gambling bill that came in. And I know that you authored several of those bills. And it wasn't out of some puritanical opposition to gambling. I don't gamble. I don't even buy lottery tickets. Sorry, Charlie. But, you know, I voted against the bills because they always had a limit. There was a limit, and it was usually something like $80 million to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing free or fair or competitive about an $80 million license that there's only a couple in the state. If we want to legalize gambling, whether it's charitable or otherwise, as long as we allow local control and it's zoned, I'm fully in favor of that. But I can't vote for a moratorium, and I'll just leave it at that. And thank you very much for hearing me out.
All right. So, again, and not to speak for Senator Rosenwald on the amendment, but one of the purposes for agreeing to a moratorium is, remember, we have a charitable gaming commission that's trying to deal with responsible gaming, how we're managing our gaming laws as a whole. We just did a RFP out and selected a vendor to take a look at the regulations in the state and the laws in the state to see how they compare with other states, to see if New Hampshire's doing it right. That commission won't even give its ruling and give its report until the end of this year. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure we're going to meet that deadline. We may end up with asking for an extension because of the scope that we've created in that commission to look at how New Hampshire's forward-looking on gaming, what it looks like, and how we can have a plan to look forward. So the reason I agree with the moratorium is strictly to give time for that to happen, and to see to make sure everything's happening and that we're looking holistically and not just looking through a straw at one object. And so I'll support the amendment and the moratorium for that purpose, to allow that commission to do its work, to make the recommendations. And we may see a recommendation to repeal this coming out of that commission. I don't know where it's going to go until we see the outcome. So that's why I'll support the amendment. It's, again, to give the commission the time to work, to look at the big picture of gaming, and come up with a future plan, a capital improvement plan, if you will, for gaming, what it's going to look like going forward in future years. So, any further discussion on the amendment? All right, so all those in favor of Senate Bill 472 as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. So 3-2. So Ennis and Senator. who wants to take it out? Lou, Cindy? Lou will take it out. Great. All right. Next up is 585, I believe. So 585, if you remember, was this passive investor bill stating that DRA will not put a lien on passive investors unless the investor is an active participant in the operation of the hospitality industry that's in question, but hasn't paid the tax. I think we heard from DRA on this bill that if you're an S corp or a C corp and you're an investor, you would not have your property attached unless there was a transfer of assets.
Right.
But otherwise, if you were just a shareholder in a S corp or a C corporation, you would not have a personal lien placed against your personal property as an investor. However, for LLCs, we do that.
Yeah.
And so this seeks to correct that imbalance.
It's a good bill. I'm a passive investor in a few places. One just closed,
Mhm.
and I'm not on the hook for the unpaid rent. So this is a reasonable approach for passive investors. If you're not passive, sorry, you're on the hook.
Right.
Yep.
You're actively involved in management.
I'm looking at my notes on this bill and I see that DRA also told us that they don't know who are the passive investors. And so it could be challenging for them to implement this.
Understood. Further comments, questions? So I'll make a motion of auto pass on Senate Bill 585. Do I have a second? Second. It's been moved by me, seconded by Senator Innes, and the bill is open to further amendment. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I move Amendment 019-0169S?
I'll second it so we can talk about it.
Thank you.
They have that.
Yep.
We talked about,
It was given
I'll
out
wait for it's
last week.
distributed.
Or a week before, the date of January 17th, so we've had
Oh,
it
yeah,
for a
yeah.
couple weeks. Senator Murphy, speak to your amendment.
Thank you. During the hearing, I asked DRA, I related a personal anecdote that 11 years ago, I paid my meals and rooms tax 2 days late and was assessed between penalties and interest, something like $3,000 in fines. And that was on an outstanding meals and rooms obligation of about $10,000. So it was a 30% to paying it the next day. It was quite onerous. And so what this amendment would do is simply says that the lien is on the tax itself, not on penalties and interest. So the lien process still happens if somebody doesn't pay it. It's just that if they pay the tax, they're not going to lose their home. Somebody having a lien attached to their house or penalties and interest seems to be a bit too far. And so I think it's a reasonable step. It still allows the lien process otherwise, and I ask for your support.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's the mechanism to collect the interest and tax fines? If someone is, I mean, you're an outlier to a certain extent, right? Just 2 days is one thing, but someone who's 5 months past due and they apply a lien to it over 5 months of penalties because they haven't submitted their.
Well, it would happen long before that. I mean, if somebody doesn't pay their meals and rooms tax, DRA is right there, crawling up there, you know what, looking for the money, and they will come and yank a license, and you literally can't operate.
Well, we did have a situation in Manchester where it was about a $500 million in Ruby Meals that was not paid.
Yeah. So, and I'm aware of that story. I actually know that gentleman, and he did wrong. He went to jail. I mean, the penalties for this are not unsubstantial. He served time in prison for what he did. I agree with having a lien process. It is the state's money. It is tax that's taken from people. My only issue is applying it to interest and penalties, as well as the outstanding principal, I think is a bit too far.
Senator D can go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I agree with this. It's the state's money, they should be paid, but remember, you get 3% for collecting it.
You know,
So it's your money too. Because
Yeah.
you get 3%, and a big deal, that's a lot of money. If you're running a big time operation, you take 3% of rooms and meals and, you know, reassign that to your profit. That's a lot of money.
I wonder if the senator's amendment is designed to forgive a minor mistake, and I think it is. What if we were to put a 30-day or less sort of statement in this amendment? Where I'm going with this is, you get busy, it's August, you're completely booked out, you're just trying to keep up, you're short-staffed, so you're helping with tables or you're cleaning rooms or whatever business you're in, and you just miss it by 2 days. And then you get hammered with interest and penalties and you end up paying thousands of dollars extra. That seems harsh. It would seem to me if you're, if you're behaving with good intent, you shouldn't be drilled for this. Now, if it's a repeat offense, that's another matter. If you're doing this every month, you're a week late, okay, there's something going on. But I agree with what Senator Murphy's trying to accomplish here. I do think we want to be sure that we get it right. And we don't just give people free license to not pay.
Right, so the only thing I'm gonna say is, again, I'm looking at at line 4, even in the amendment, which is basically, I think, a restatement. If an operator required to collect and transmit a tax under this chapter neglects or refuses to pay after demand.
So the
So
state's come to you.
this is already the state's coming to you and saying, hey, you owe us.
Well,
And you're saying, I'm
yeah.
not paying, right? Or you just don't pay, right? So in that case, should we be forgiving on the lien the penalties and tax after they've been asked? And it said no.
But to clarify, it says the amount of the tax becomes a lien in favor of the state upon all property. So the tax is still there. The tax has to be paid. And the interest and penalties aren't forgiven. It's just that if somebody owes $50,000 in taxes and they've been assessed another $50,000 in interest and penalties, they pay the $50,000 in taxes. They still have to pay the other $50,000 in order to continue operating. They're just not going to lose their house or have a lien attached to their property. There's no forgiveness of debt here.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It just lowers it says that you're not going to attach a lien to someone's home as long as they pay the tax.
All right.
So Roosevelt.
Thank you. It seems to me like if we not forgive the penalties, but exempt them from the lien, we are allowing someone who's already delinquent to have the state float them money over whatever extended period of time. So I'm struggling with your amendment for that reason. Because it's already been, you're already delinquent, ERA is already coming after you.
Yeah.
Why should we not try to get you to pay up more quickly?
Well, and you have the money.
In theory.
You've accrued the money.
DRA is quite voracious in coming after the taxes. And I'm all for having taxes be paid. This does nothing to affect the taxes, just the interest and penalties, which can be huge. And I found that out the hard way by paying it 2 days late.
So I'd be interested to talk about a bill for next year to deal with that, to at least allow discretion on DRA's part.
Yeah.
Again, to Senator D'Alessandra's point, if you've never been late before and all of a sudden you're late once by 2 days, should they be able to waive penalty and assessment?
Sure.
And whether that exists in law. or not.
I'm not here to try to force it down people's throats. And if there isn't widespread agreement with it, I will withdraw the amendment.
If I could, I would say I support this concept 100%. I think we need to maybe tweak the amendment a little bit to get it right. Maybe we could do something on the floor. Because I agree conceptually with what you're trying to do here. I understand. And, putting the lien for the interest and penalties, may keep you from being able to do business. You might be able to come up with the tax, but not the penalties. Let's keep you in business so you can eventually pay. I don't know. I like what you're trying to do here.
Anyway, I'll withdraw the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
The amendment's been withdrawn. So we're back on the underlying bill with no amendment. Is there any further discussion on the underlying bill? All those in favor of Senate Bill 585 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, 4-1, and I will take it. I believe we are. I think actually we might be done. So 586, I'm going to hold. That's the odd fellows. Well, we're going to have some bills coming over from the House anyway. It's not an FN bill, so we don't have to deal with it until April. But it gives us a carrier bill in case there's something we need to put a non-germane amendment on and deal with in committee because we don't have late filing bills this late. So I'm just going to hold 586 as a carrier bill for something else. And with that, I'll entertain a motion. Sonia, we're all set. We got everything we need. Entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Been moved by Senator Del Sandro, second by Senator Murphy to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And we are adjourned.
Great.